My name is Sharina the Storyteller, and today I want to introduce a man, an artist from Panama, who moved to Wichita Falls, Texas to be with his mother and stepdad in 1974. Texas was a place where he heard the unfamiliar sounds of English, and he spoke Spanish at home while learning how to navigate speaking English to the rest of the world. He bounced around starting in Wichita Falls, then Garland, but was shortly after forced to move due to racism, a man pulling a gun on his brother, which later led him to move to Dallas to his grandmother's home on Buckner and St. Francis. He is one of nine. He started working when he was 6 years old, completing the paper route with his brother Tito. He went through life's journey seeing the real things, from dealing with women, going to prison, getting out, navigating being an entrepreneur, and feeling the effects of betrayal while also simultaneously becoming a father. I would like to introduce you to Javier Tadeo Contreras, the man behind Arts Tadeo.
Wow. Wow. I mean, that just kind of penetrates through the organs of my skin. Since the skin is the largest organ on your body, it just kind of just did what it did, huh? My youth and the time I was growing up just kind of basically was different from most norm. And I always felt that I was really different from most of my siblings anyways. I just always seen something at a very young age. Probably started when I was 3 years old is when I started kind of feeling the difference about, who I am, what I am, and, have always felt different because I was always a thinker. My mind would just never shut off. It would just constantly be going, and I'd be asking, what is this all about? As everything is going on, from school, going back from school, going back to recalculate or re-break things down in my mind as it races at night, and always heard this voice that there was always something bigger than myself, something greater than myself. And I still struggle with this today, and in this world that we call give and take, and what is your purpose and what's to be and what's not to be. So
How was it for you growing up in Panama?
it was great. Panama was absolutely an amazing place because I remember, at 3 years old, it was great, but I saw things that I shouldn't have possibly see, like at a very young age, I had to be able to we grew up fast because, my mother uh, was uh, on a bus with all of us, and there was a lady by the name of Miss Lloyd. She was from Jamaican descent. Was old. I mean, she was really a woman that had a lot of energy, but she was probably about 90 years old, just grayish hair with plaits, and you could that African strong Jamaican root and that's in her, But she loved me to death, loved me to death, loved my all of us to death, and so her and my mother, I did not know this till I was older that they met me, met us on the bus as we was traveling. My mom couldn't understand. She was trying to figure it out because she had to make a move from Panama to go to the United States, and what she was going to do with she couldn't take all of the kids all at once. So she came up with a situation or a mindset, well, you know what, I'll just take half. And she took the oldest ones and then my youngest sister, because my younger sister was my stepdad's, baby. So my mom ended up doing that. But before that, she met Miss Lloyd on a train. Miss Lloyd saw me sleeping with my mom and my little sister, and took some thought and loving to me. So when that took place, my mom and her just had a discussion just like that, and then next thing I know, Miss Lloyd was basically raising us, and my mom would send money every month to Miss Lloyd to take care of all four of us, me, Pancho, Mercedes, and Mara. So that part of Panama was just a very, very uh, 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 strong part in my life because Miss Lloyd was a type of woman. She went to church, Father Divines, uh, every Sunday, every Wednesday, and all we was instilled was the book, the word. And from what I understand, I was able to play piano, and I don't remember how to play piano now, but from what they're saying, at 3 years old, I was just playing piano and I was preaching. My sister said, you was reciting the word at a very young age. I was preaching. I was like, man, really? What happened now? So um, I was able to see things that most young kids weren't able to see. Like my uncle would come in there with different women, and in this house, it was like a mansion. It was like huge rooms that a lot of people would rent out on the bottom and at the top. And Miss Lloyd was a very giving woman, and she took care of a lot of people. She even took care of my cousins that came in. She was just a very amazing caretaker, and everything that she did, Miss Lloyd, was everything was, you got to take this route, that route, this, that. There was never going to a hospital for anything. And Miss Lloyd was a very strong, very protective of me, but very more protective of us, but very protective of myself. I wasn't in school yet. My other siblings would go off to school, and I would stay. I'd call Miss Lloyd Mama Lloyd, and she was just. I just remember Miss Lloyd is just ingrained in my head how wonderful she was, and I really, really, really regret that once I came to the States that we just kind of disconnected in terms of not calling or anything like that. But it was just a time where we just couldn't even afford to make phone calls because it was just so challenging, and it was just a lot of money involved, in just making phone calls. So yeah, so we were able to have such a great time. I remember that my uncles and different people would come in there, and then I'd be hearing noises, and I'd look into to the little cracks of the different homes, and I'd see things that I shouldn't be seeing, like in terms of older adults having sex and things of that nature. And that really kind of just started me off, at a very young age to know what the birds and the bees or what sex was about, but made me also curious at a very young age. So
In how you are right now, right? What do you think Miss Lloyd would say to you today if she could see where you are?
oh, you had to go there, huh? Well, she'd probably say, I'm proud of you. And the reason why is because you've done something that I knew that you was always sent here to do. And what would I say to her was I'd be like, I'm sorry, because I didn't keep my promise. And the promise was that I was never going to keep in touch. I was never going to lose touch with her, and I'd always get in touch with her and talk to her. And at a young age, I just did not know how to put that together. And that right there is one of the most painful things, because here I am years later that have just taken the time to just say, man, what a wonderful human being of a woman that a lot of people miss out in life. Because when people come and you meet people and how much important that they are to you and what it is, it's like art doesn't find you. Um, well, let me say this. Art finds you. You don't find it. It's just like, people take their whole life and take things for granted, and when I say that, it's just right here. When people come and believe in you and love you, when people believe in you, that means they love you, or that's the beginning of some type of bond or some type of love. It doesn't matter who it is or what it is. It's just, some people just fall in love with people the first time they see them in sight. It doesn't always have to be a man and a woman. You know what I mean? Some people just fall in love because that's where they're supposed to be. There's supposed to be something that they're supposed to learn from each other. You're supposed to learn from this person. That person is supposed to learn from you. A season does not stay the same. It gets cold, hot, fall, whatever. Seasons do not change, do not stay the same. And people, I believe people are seasoned. Some people put season to the food. I think humans put season to each other's lives in the same way as you put spices to flare up or to, create a certain taste. And that's what I look at people. I look at people, and it kind of goes, uh, this season could be really tough for you. You know what I mean? But if somebody comes in, you know, into that season, they're a season too. That person just basically is a season to show you or open up a door or to be something that you're not supposed to be. So
Have you ever connected with Mrs. Floyd after that?
I
Ever?
did not, no, and that's why I apologize for my emotions because that right there was something that, and again, I don't want to beat myself up because I was young, and then didn't fully understand the English language about phones, getting on the phones and paying, and my mom and them couldn't afford getting the phone, but and writing to from and you get stamps and all that. I think we did it a couple of times, but after that, um, that was that. And then when I found out that she'd left everything for me, the mansion and everything was all for me because she'd always tell me this is for you. And finding out that like years later was when I drove back. I went to Panama around 4 years ago, and I seen the place, and they just everything was cleaned out, cleared out, just a bunch of land on where we lived at. You know what I mean? So it was just a moment. I had a moment then, but her spirit stays with me, and I got her, face ingrained, in my heart, in my mind, and she's just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful person that her in herself, she was here for purpose.
Do you think she's still alive?
Miss Lloyd passed away. Remember when I came here, she was in her early 90s, late 80s. So when Miss Lloyd, I think Miss Lloyd probably died probably about 100 years old, 102, 103 years old. It was probably about 15 when she passed away. So, um, you know, uh, and I know she's in heaven because I feel her spirit. So, yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
With your mother making the decision of who came to America and who stayed in Panama, did that make a major effect on you how you viewed your mom?
It did because once that bond is somewhat broken, I think through the family struggled. All nine of us struggled to find our identity and the love and the bond for each other. So we kind of felt somewhat animosity because we didn't get here all together. I think it always does that to people that there's a common bond that goes, and once that umbilical cord is kind of cut, it kind of does something. Like for example, I have a younger brother also that after a while he just got here at 15. When he was 15, it was us. Then I had my mother had a child right after my father got killed because I was the last set from my father. My mother had two other kids with my stepdad, and then right after about a year or two after my father got killed, my mom was in a relationship, got pregnant. My mom wasn't gonna give up any kids, so he stayed with my grandfather on the islands and was raised to him till he was 15. So a lot of times, when him and I get together, I feel, and I said, and he felt that he was abandoned. And I had to remind him many times, dude, you was never abandoned, because if you would have got here when we got here, it would have been a different ballgame. You would have thought twice. Oh, I'm glad I didn't get here till I was 15, because all we did was basically work, 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 work. And so you know, there was somewhat aminosity, but the aminosity only came. It was weird. It didn't take place when we were younger. It took place when we got older, because everybody got along, and then all of a sudden, my brother, got older. He started graduating. He was like almost like the patriarch of the family that kept everything together, because my mom was always working, and I had my older sister that went off, to got older and started getting, into boys, got pregnant young. So that kind of, started, taking one sibling here, one sibling there. And then, once it came time to kind of get together, you would see a lot of the jealousy part. You know what I mean? Well, we didn't get to spend time. We didn't get to do this. And my younger sister was basically a brilliant, awesome Olympic, superstar, but the mindset that she had was just a different mindset because we were just so separated in terms of the ideology, and you could tell that we had a lot that we had to catch up to because they got here 3 or 4 years before we got here. And then once that took place, it was just hard to kind of bond back together, but because everybody's age gap. I was 8 years younger than my brother, and then so on and so forth. But the four of us basically kind of kept a strong. It was like us four strong bond, them four identifying with each other, and then the older brother always taking care of the little brother, and so on and so forth, where the bond came, and that's the kind of memory that I've had in terms of Panama and the transition here.
When you moved to America, what was going through your mind?
When I got here in America, things was rapidly moving in a very, very fast pace because you see all these things on TV about what America is and how the opportunity is. Everything's more like a cartoon at that time because we wanted to live in a fantasy place. So I thought that the United States was a place where you just get there and everything all your worries would be over with because in my mind as a young child, everything was a cartoon state. When you're young, you want to see things or fantasies in terms of cartoons that you can jump here and you want to survive or just do this and then you can bounce back from one universe to another universe. So as soon as I got here, I started realizing that everything that I thought was a cartoon really wasn't a cartoon. It was just really, really life was very challenging. And we had 9 brothers and sisters, and we all lived together. And I remember, me, my brother Pancho, Tito, and Tony, Tito being the oldest and Tony being the second to the oldest, and then Pancho being my older brother, and myself. We'd find ourselves sleeping in the same bedroom, and enduring some heavy, brutal winters in Wichita Falls because it was just so brutal, and we didn't have the money to really turn on the heater, because my stepdad and my mom was trying to make things happen, and it was very conservative, and then my other 4 sisters, they also slept in the other room, and there was like, I had 4 sisters, and the thing about it is they did the same. There's 2 on one end and 2 on the other end, and my youngest sister, which made 5, they were all crunched up in one bed to try to stay warm, and we'd always have these quilts, a bunch of quilts just to stay warm. So it was just a brutal time, and we had to pick up odds and end jobs like selling mistletoe, paper routes, selling roses on the corner of the streets that translated from, selling golf balls at the nearby golf course next to our home in Wichita Falls, And my stepdad, being in the military, had some perks about, being able to get into the golf course. So we kind of took advantage of that. But for other people that were using those for pleasure, me and my older brother, I'm saying little brother, were using that for survival. We would go and to different, ponds where, where the lakes were, the golf balls would be hit, and you just go find them. They had this little squeezy type thing that you could put the ball inside and shoot it, and then we'd have, our socks to put all the balls in, and we'd carry that around. And back in those days, we'd sell a ball for 10 cents or 25 cents, and at the end of the day, we'd take that money and kind of utilize it to do what we had to do just to survive. Well, we'd pick up bottles. Bottles were 3 cents, 5 cents at that time to collect and just kind of get the bare essentials that we needed, because at times, we'd go to school and it would just be a piece of bologna and some bread, and then sometimes we would, because I didn't want the kids to laugh at me, excuse me, I would take the brown bag and blow into the brown bag and fill it up to make it seem like like you had a lot, because once you got to school, everybody had their Twinkies in there, everybody had all their fruits, and they had all those types of things. But us, my family was 9 of us, plus my mom and my stepdad. That was a lot to endure, a lot to basically, whew, people aren't making it today. So just imagine how it was back then. And opportunities wasn't just as vast or just as much robust as it is today. So I started to realize that this is just not what life should be about. You know what I mean? And I started kind of digging in deep to try to meet friends and trying to gel in with society. But Wichita Falls was not a bad upbringing. It just wasn't, because it was a melting pot for so many people, because it was a military base. Shepherd Air Force Base was right around the corner. My stepdad was stationed there at one point, and you had different cultures. But even so, with that being said, it was just only a handful of black families or people of color in that neighborhood. We lived at City View. We had to play sports. When one sport was done, basketball, football, track, baseball, whatever, we'd always out. We'd always go swimming in the irrigation ditch, and you just meet all types of people. But you could see that even though as a child we wanted to look at everything as a cartoon, you could tell it in the opportunities that our parents had. And every day they'd come in, and they'd be tired. My mom used to work at Johnson and Johnson. My stepdad worked at an insurance company, selling insurance. And even with that being said, it was just so enormous. My older brother, they all wanted to be so much like, was always out, trying to hustle and do things that they needed to do as well. And they was playing basketball, and very, very popular. My family was very, very popular and was a tight knit. Um, I don't know if we want to say poverty, but I would want to say that we was always living in poverty. We just didn't show it because of our pride and who we were, to see the future in terms of fight through it, And I think we got that from my mother. My mother was a very, very strong. She's a very strong African Latina that takes her heritage, very prideful, which kind of translates in myself as well, because it tells a lot of stories behind it. It kind of removes a lot of plaque behind what people think or what people say. And I'm just the type of person that I'm able to see or feel a lot about people. When people really take me as being a real misunderstood person. And, for a long time, I wanted people to understand what I was saying, or what meanings, or sometimes the words come out a different way, but my mind would be racing so fast and would be ahead of myself that the words would kind of have to take time to kind of match. So um, at that point in time, my mother and stepfather basically got divorced. And, you know, um, the reason why they got divorced is because it was just a numerous challenge for him. Mr. Edward Collins, great man, loved him to death, and he was just the best father figure that he could be at the time. However, later on things were basically a little bit different, because we were just kind of young to understand what was going on with you know the relationship with man and woman, meaning my mom and my dad. They had to have the separate relationship without the family as well at certain time, and I just, for me right now, I feel that really took a toll. And then not only that, my brother was driving a motorcycle one time, and the immigrant in my mother, once my brother just got a brand new motorcycle, got a car accident, and we got sued. So when that lawsuit came, it startled my mom. Any woman that's from another country comes here does not really understand, how the process works. If you have an accident, that's what insurance is for. But she was thinking that, well, they're gonna sue her and take everything that she has, or put her already in a situation. So that really is, in her mind, well, man, I just want to leave because this lawsuit and whatever. So, Mom, that's what insurance are for. I'm saying that now, back then. So we end up moving to we end up moving to my stepdad's mother's home. I mean, apartment actually. That apartment was um, um, actually we didn't move there first. Where we moved was a place called King Edward's apartment, and King Edward's apartment was right there on Buckner and I believe PV in Dallas. And we used to go fishing in this little creek that was behind our place, and we used to walk a mile to SS Connor just to go to school. We would have to work through the, go through like a little small little wooded area. We was calling it a forest back then, but it was just actually a wooded area that we'd have to cross, go to the creek, and then we'd walk to school, and that's what it was. And we used to go stop by and pick some big pomegranates and steal the fruits. I guess that's what you would say. But we'd actually come up on a place where there was some pomegranates, and at times there was a lot of coyotes and wild dogs or whatever, because it was still kind of heavily populated. It was just now starting to kind of have some growth to it. So during that process, I remember my sister, my brother, and I would walk to school. And it wasn't until a point in time when my mother just started getting her driver's license. And boy, that was a scary situation, because when she got her driver's license, she would just, I remember one time she picked us up and it was getting in the car. Before we could get in the car, she would take off. And I'm like, yo, wait a minute. And so, my mom just being the immigrant she is, And so a lot of things that were uh, taking place back then kind of just sat back, and I was like, man, my mom done such a great, wonderful job. The sacrifice that she has done, and not being a woman that didn't have a lot of education, but she had the will and the drive to instill that into us to understand that your power is within inside yourself. Uh, Being able to get into the golf course, so we kind of took advantage of that. But for other people that were using those for pleasure, me and my older brother, I'm saying little brother, were using that for survival. We would go and to different ponds where where the lakes were, the golf balls would be hit, and you just go find them. They had this little squeezy type thing that you could put the ball inside and shoot it, and then we'd have our socks to put all the balls in, and we'd carry that around. And back in those days, we'd sell a ball for 10 cents or 25 cents, and at the end of the day, we'd take that money and kind of utilize it to do what we had to do just to survive. Or we'd pick up bottles. Bottles were 3 cents, 5 cents at that time to collect and just kind of get the bare essentials that we needed, because at times we'd go to school and it would just be a piece of bologna and some bread, and then sometimes we would, because I didn't want the kids to laugh at me, excuse me, I would take the brown bag and blow into the brown bag and fill it up to make it seem like you had a lot, because once you got to school, everybody had their Twinkies in there, everybody had all their fruits, and they had all those types of things. But us, my family was 9 of us, plus my mom and my stepdad. That was a lot to endure, a lot to basically, people aren't making it today. So just imagine how it was back then. And opportunities wasn't just as vast or just as much robust as it is today. So I started to realize that this is just not what life should be about. You know what I mean? And I started kind of digging in deep to try to meet friends and trying to gel in with society. But Wichita Falls was not a bad upbringing. It just wasn't, because it was a melting pot for so many people, because it was a military base. Shepherd Air Force Base was right around the corner. My stepdad was stationed there at one point, and you had different cultures. But even so, with that being said, it was just only a handful of black families or people of color in that neighborhood. We lived at City View. We had to play sports, when one sport was done, basketball, football, track, baseball, whatever, we'd always out. We'd always go swimming in the irrigation ditch, and and you just meet all types of people. But you could see that even though as a child we wanted to look at everything as a cartoon, you could tell it in the opportunities that our parents had. And every day they'd come in and they'd be tired. My mom used to work at Johnson and Johnson. My stepdad worked at an insurance company, selling insurance. And even with that being said, it was just so enormous. My older brother, I wanted to be so much like, was always out, trying to hustle and do things that they needed to do as well. And they was playing basketball and very, very popular. My family was very, very popular and was a tight knit. Um, I don't know if we want to say poverty, but I would want to say that we was always living in poverty. We just didn't show it because of our pride and who we were to see the future in terms of fight through it, And I think we got that from my mother. My mother was a very, very strong. She's a very strong African Latina that takes her heritage very prideful, which kind of translates in myself as well, because it tells a lot of stories behind it. It kind of removes a lot of plaque behind what people think or what people say. And I'm just a type of person that I'm able to see or feel a lot about people. When people really take me as being a real misunderstood person. And, for a long time, I wanted people to understand what I was saying or what meanings, or sometimes the words come out a different way, but my mind would be racing so fast and would be ahead of myself that the words would kind of have to take time to kind of match. So at that point in time, my mother and stepfather basically got divorced. And, the reason why they got divorced is because it was just a numerous challenge for him. Mr. Edward Collins, great man, loved him to death, and he was just the best father figure that he could be at the time. However, later on things were basically a little bit different, because we were just kind of young to understand what was going on with the relationship with man and woman, meaning my mom and my dad. They had to have the separate relationship without the family as well at certain time, and I just, for me right now, I feel that really took a toll. And then not only that, my brother was driving a motorcycle one time, and the immigrant in my mother, once my brother just got a brand new motorcycle, got a car accident, and we got sued. So when that lawsuit came, it startled my mom. Any woman that's from another country comes here does not really understand, how the process works. If you have an accident, that's what insurance is for. But she was thinking that, well, they're gonna sue her and take everything that she has, or put her already in a situation. So that really, in her mind, well, man, I just want to leave because this lawsuit and whatever. So, Mom, that's what insurance is for. I'm saying that now, back then. So we end up moving to my stepdad's mother's home. I mean, apartment, actually. That apartment was, actually, we didn't move there first. Where we moved was a place called King Edward's apartment. And King Edward's apartment was right there on Buckner and I believe PV in Dallas. And, we used to go fishing in this little creek that was behind our place, and we used to walk a mile to SS Connor just to go to school. We would have to walk through go through like a little small little wooded area. We was calling it a forest back then, but it was just actually a wooded area that we'd have to cross, go to the creek, and then we'd walk to school, and that's what it was. And we used to go stop by and pick some big pomegranates and steal the fruits. I guess that's what you would say. But we'd actually come up on a place where there was some pomegranates, and at times there was a lot of coyotes and wild dogs or whatever, because it was still kind of heavily populated. It was just now starting to kind of have some growth to it. So during that process, I remember my sister, my brother, and I would walk to school. And it wasn't until a point in time when my mother just started getting her driver's license. And boy, that was a scary situation, because when she got her driver's license, she would just I remember one time she picked us up and it was getting in the car. Before we could get in the car, she would take off, and I'm like, yo, wait a minute. And so, my mom just being the immigrant she is, and so a lot of things that were uh, taking place back then kind of just sat back, and I was like, man, my mom done such a great, wonderful job. The sacrifice that she has done, and not being a woman uh, that didn't have a lot of education, but she had the will and the drive to instill that into us to understand that your power is within inside yourself. Imagine my junior year, what a wonderful time, being homeless. I had some people take me in at certain times. When I say homeless, I didn't have a place of my own. So I had a Exelon bag that I'd have all my tennis shoes, my socks, my clothes, change of underwear, and I had a certain way of doing things. I would go and basically go to restaurants to get all my soap and little knick-knack foods like your salt, pepper, and napkins and stuff. I'd put them in there, and if I get something to eat, I'd have something to always utilize. But because the first three periods were dedicated to sports, I could take a shower there. I could do everything. We had food in the breakfast time, and little girlfriends here and there would help me out here and there, and I'd just be taken in from one friend to another friend till my welcome was welcomed out. Like the Edens, they took me in for about a month and a half. That kind of got old, so I broke out and started staying with a friend named Derek Austin. We actually was all of us was homeless. We just had an electric extension cord that we would plug into other homes next to us so we could stay warm. And we used to use these little heaters. I guess what they call them, uh, uh, little stove heaters. Anyways, we'd bounce back and forth to that, and I would do that all through my junior year in high school. My junior year, after my junior year in high school, that led me to go back to Dallas, Garland, to kind of work the summer school. Then I'd come back my senior year, and again, it all started over because I had this passion about the high school. Wichita Falls High School was one of the most wonderfulest high school that I went to. So because I had to go to Wichita Falls my last 2 years because Lakeview just became too much discrimination, too much racism at Lakeview Centennial High School that we went through. In fact, they had to sue the Garland schools to change over South Garland High School because it was waving the Confederate flag, years later. But because it stemmed from that racism, that we had to leave, I had to leave from there to go back to Wichita Falls High School. So my senior year, I meet a nice young lady, Ashley, Christy Ashley, which was a wonderful young lady. We're still friends till this day. After 40 years, we talk about all the great things. She was very quiet. She was a sophomore. I was a senior. And funny, crazy things that happen. We talk about a lot of things. We talk about the past and what could have been, what isn't. But anyways, my senior year, I graduated out of that. I only had 6 weeks left. I went back to the school in Garland, Lakeview Centennial High School. And, at that time, I was like the Mr. Senior, I'm here, all the girls. And when I started touching in base with all the girls again, I was like, wow, I started realizing, hey, okay, I can pull a couple women here and there, little girls here and there. So, anyways, um, Kevin Ads, a friend of mine, we was kind of, they was just, always people was just doing things. My senior year in high school, people were smoking pot, doing ecstasy, doing LSD, and I'll tell you about that LSD later on that created a situation that made a lot of sense later on in life and my experimentation with that as well. However, they were just, white kids, man, they were just selling all kinds of stuff here and there. So one time Kevin said, hey, you want to try this out? I said, no, I don't really want to try that. But anyways, I experimented. It was okay. It kind of scared me. And I forgot that I had a little bit left in my pocket. My brother found that little bit of cocaine in my pocket that led me to what led him to scare me to death and say, hey, what, the police were looking for you. And after that, I started kind of just like was scared and fear because he told me that after high school that I led me into college. I was going to college for about 6 months, and he said, hey, man, the cops are looking for you because they found that stuff for you, right? And I didn't know if it was true or not, but that led me to go to the military. After high school, I went to college, played basketball for Eastville College, and it was just another struggling situation again. That led me to go to the military, and that's where I'm at the military, and boom.
How long were you in the military?
You know, the troubled person who I am, I stayed in the military almost 2 years, you know. Hey, at that time, I was a young youth. I really enjoyed smoking pot, you know, and that was basically it. Pot was just a great thing to me. I loved smoking pot from the time I woke up to the time I went to sleep. And um, now it's not a big thing, but in the military, you got caught smoking pot. Sometimes you're going to go to Leavenworth, go to jail, prison, whatever. However, me and Michael Lasco and Enrique Ramos, which were military buddies of mine. We rebelled so much in Germany. It was not even funny. We didn't even feel like we was in the military because we had Sergeant Hackett that really just kind of let us get away with everything. Like formation, formation for what? We would never. It was truly a situation that we were really not even in the military because we didn't have no oversight. We were medics. So as long as we had calls for our patients that come in at the dispensary, and we took care of them. If they were sick, we triage the situation. Uh, you know, as long as we were there to do that, then we was good. But at any rate, I was in the military about a year and a half before I got kicked out for smoking hash. Hash is just the same thing as marijuana, but it was so much better, so much cleaner, and got kicked out because of that. And that led me out of the military back to Garland. So that's where we're at. So military was a great time. Was one of the funnest times of my life actually, but I just didn't like that I was controlled and couldn't do anything outside of the time that I had freedom. But hey, it was still the best time, one of the best times of my life.
After getting out of the military, what did you do?
When I got out of the military, I just started working for this company called Endicott Johnson. And then Endicott Johnson was a shoe company, and I'd met my son's mother, and she got pregnant, and then basically we was really never together, but we made a beautiful child, my oldest son, Christopher. And after that, I started meeting this young lady named Renee. Her and I started dating, and heart broke here, heart broke there. So I started working for this company called Endicott Johnson, selling shoes. And as I was selling shoes for Endicott Johnson, I started pursuing this career in management for this musical mogul that we were able to get a record deal with O-Tracks record with Tommy Quan's label. The same label that Vanilla Ice was on is the same record deal that we got. We got $100,000 signing bonus, and out of that $100,000, I got $1 from this from the artist that that I was pissed off about actually. And then my attorney, Miles H. Brown, said, "Don't sue him yet. Just sue him when he makes blows up and his record gets into the millions. Because right now, if you sue him, he's going to release you. You're probably going to be tied up to get your percentage, which is at that time was only 10-15%. That's only $15,000, and I lose out. So we was going for the long game. So at any rate, that took place. I was working at Endicott Johnson, and then that's when it begins. That's when the turmoil begins. That's when Tadeo is awakened. That's when the street name Panama. They call me Panama as well because I translate that to the part when I'm getting ready to go to prison. And the prison was one of the greatest things that could have happened to me. Most people say, "Oh man, you went to prison, all that." When I actually tell you, it was the greatest thing that could have happened to me looking back right now.
How long were you in prison?
I was in prison 6.5 years, but the sentence was 13. So remember that when I went to prison, we have to go back and the reason why I went to prison. So I was working at Endicott Johnson. I had just got a record deal. Was just modeling for GCC Dallas. Everything was up on the uptick. Everything was just getting ready to just absolutely blow up. Everything was lined up. Life was looking great. We started creating a buzz in Dallas. The record was out with the same record label as Vanilla Ice. I had this good-looking white kid that could write, sing, was better than Vanilla Ice actually. His name was Jay Chill. Only for him to turn out to be a sour dud. in terms of what he didn't take care of business. I started realizing that he was an ultra diva, and in fact, him and I had a big fight where I had one time he kicked me directly in the nuts, and I fell straight down, and I had to say, okay, just let me get my breath. And at that point in time, I took him all the way down from the steps and started all the way down the stair. And I must have beat him to the middle of next week. Where that mark that I hit him so hard is still an imprint in the side. If you saw him and talked to him today, it's still there.
In the book, you say prison saved you. Can you elaborate why?
Prison allows you, for people like myself, I would say, was a big awakening because it was a big survival thing. You don't know what to expect in prison. All I could tell you, the smartest people in the world are in prison. And prison is not like what a lot of people think in terms of, there's a lot of people in there that shouldn't be in prison. There's a lot of knowledge in prison. That's why they're in prison. These people try to figure out how they can manipulate and beat the system. However, what I was able to learn from prison was survival, knowledge, and freedom. What the real underlying truth about what people have been lied to. I went to prison and learned. It was more of a school education. I learned Freemasonry. I learned the Illuminati. I learned the 33rd level. I learned things that most people would not grasp or most people won't understand. I learned this thing that we're living in today, right now, in the 1990s. Everything that we're going on right now, what's going on right now, I learned that back then. I got to prison, I got indicted for $248 million worth of importation into the United States. Me and my co-conspirator. I'm not going to say his name just because, that's not what you do. So my co-conspirator, actually, I introduced him to two white American females, and they introduced the two girls introduced him to several other females, unbeknownst to me knowing what was going on. One of the my co-conspirators and I were really tight. We would just hang out because we met at Endicott Johnson before my record deal and all that type of stuff, and we'd just hang out. And then he was gravitating to me, but what he was doing, he was basically going behind my back, using these young ladies to recruit the young ladies to go as mules. They would go to Bangkok, all these different countries, Switzerland, China, and bring back. They were mules. They were balloon swallowers. What people don't understand what balloon swallowers are is basically you taking the drugs and put it in the balloons, you digest it, and then when you come back, you defecate it out and go in there, and then those products be $1 million, sometimes $200,000. Unbeknownst to me knowing what was going on, the feds came in and said, hey, we got an indictment for you, but we're going to give you immunity if you testify against these people. Me knowing who I am, I'm not going to testify against anyone. So because if I testify on that going on, that means I'm guilty. So for that reason, we went into a whole another quagmire when racism really kicked in. You didn't have no people of your peers in there at all. Meaning by my peers, the judges were all racial, older white people. The average age was probably about 70 years old, retired. And then you got these other two white girls coming in and basically testifying that this was what was going on. One of them said that I didn't have anything to do with it, but one of them was government witness. The other one was just a subpoena by the government. So one of them was bound to say whatever the government had to say. And then one of them was like, Tadeo didn't have anything to do with it. Teddy didn't have anything to do with it. In fact, I haven't even seen Teddy in 2 years. So we got convicted. Once we got convicted, I got 144 months actually, which I calculated, I think that was 12 and a half years. So with me doing the drug treatment program, which I got a certificate to be a counselor and put that with good time, got credit for 6.5 years. So, during that time, I was in I took up, sports, and I was very good in it. I took up, was working in the law library to make sure that I fought this case. So it got remanded back to the courts and I won the case. So by that time, When it got remanded back to the court, they cut it in half. And I said, well, no, we're going to keep fighting this. But by that time, time was served because I've already did the time. When it came back, I only had about maybe 8 more months to go. So once that took place, prison was like this right here. It was like as soon as you turn on the lights, you feel it. I mean, it doesn't matter what's going on for me, anyways. All the sensors, all your sensories, like your eyes, your nose, your sense of feel, it's amplified in prison because you're constantly on survival mode. You can see the corners before you can't take a sharp corner because you don't know if you're going to get stuck or violent or whatever. So you could actually see the corners. You could when they come and do a count and the lights go on, you could actually feel the minute that light goes on, you can feel it on your skin. It alerts you to wake up. So all your senses, for me anyways, because I'm always an alert person, woke up. And so you meet all these brilliant people. You meet Muslims, you meet Hindus, you meet Santeros, you meet Buddhas, you meet all these remarkable mystical people that just kind of give you everything that you're like, man, what is going on? Where you're able to translate, like when a country tells you and programs you to be a certain way, like America's a lot of programming in these superpower countries. Russia has their own propaganda program country. China programs their people. America program their people. That's why they call them systems. Are you going to be a system? It is absolutely no fallacies why the age of 18 to 35, why people of color are incarcerated, because it's called the system. The biggest money maker in America are privatized prisons. So all these things I did not understand. So when it talk about culture and purpose and all this, everything that I do in art has something to do with a story, something to do with a feeling. Maybe I took some LSD and it woke me up way back when I was in high school. And from that point on, it took me to different dimensions and able to open up my brain to be able to see things. But the only thing that I'm going to say is this right here is that I was able to see everything that I'm doing in life since I was 3 years old. I knew I was going to prison. I knew this was happening. And I would tell people that these things were happening. It's like, man, you're just crazy. But they happen. Just like this part of my segment, things are going to be so innumerous. But being in prison also showed you that not only that racism and this thing called hate exists on the exterior world, it extends itself to the walking dead prison.
You said modern day slavery earlier. What do you mean by that, being in prison?
Well, modern day slavery is that everything, okay, so in the stock market, right? The stock market, dry goods, for example, the biggest dry goods consumer and people that purchase dry goods are Keefe Foods. Everything is dry beans, dried compressed foods. Everything's in prison. Who buys those things? The prisoners. Tuna. It's a big business. For every time a prisoner goes to prison, it's about $40,000. Now I know it was about $34,000 a year for one inmate per year. Now, if you got millions and millions of people that look like me that are incarcerated, you get 25 cents. You might make $1 a day making textile, like military gear, like the military. Who makes that? We make that. Who makes the signs, all the stop signs and all the signs that you see, the license plate? Military. I mean, the prisoners make that, and you only pay $1 a day, maybe 65 cents a day. You get $13 a month. Translate that how many hours you work. To textiles. All these judge benches, all these things in the judicial system. Prisoners make that. A lot of people don't know that. So do you realize a lot of these stock markets that are bought are by our government? The senators buy stock in. How do they know all that? You see what I'm saying? Because that's inside traders. Same thing with what Donald Trump and them are doing and his sons with cryptocurrency, Bitcoin. Well, the modern day slavery is are in prison, and the people that are in prison are people of color. So what has changed? You know what I mean? Why is it that there's more higher crime in a certain area, and you can't even find, if the crime is in a higher certain area, why come there isn't any beef up police there? Because it's all a system. So that's why I said that that's what the modern day slavery is what I feel like is about today.
In your book, when I was reading, it says there's a set of rules that can mean life or death. How have those rules and way of living lingered with you over time?
In America, there's nowhere anywhere in the world that being a person of color allows you to get in a car, and the minute you're stopped. You don't know if you're going to go home. So there's a life of rules of, the rules of engagement, what you do as far as a person of color. Neighborhood, don't you ever heard this word? Don't get caught in that neighborhood. If you're an American, it's the land of the free. Why should I not be caught in a neighborhood? What does it have to offer that I can't be caught in a certain neighborhood? What is it that I can't do? I have to put my hands on a steering wheel, or if I'm any kind of shade of color, not knowing that I'm a black Latino, what I mean, not even American, but yet I'm categorizing that just based on the content of my color. So those are the rules that are put forth by the system. Um, it wasn't that the thing that you could be intellectual or smarter than this person. It was everything was based on skin. So based on skin color allowed me to understand what the rules are, and they still apply to this day, and they're applying even more right now. What's going on in the world with the DEI and everything with this administration. So I'm just kind of going back and forward to what lands me in order to create. So I believe my purpose to be able to create, I have to touch the political realm, the color barrier realm, the freedom realm, the sports realm, because when you paint is basically everything about what you're going through. Art is about everything that you see, and then you make it into a story.
Let me ask you, when did you start painting and becoming this artist as Art Tadeo? Was any of this when you were in prison or before you went to prison?
I started painting right before I went to prison. And my sisters and my mom was like, wow. And at that time I was painting oil on canvas, but I didn't like the way oil felt. You know what I mean? I was like, man, this thing kind of smells. I got to put linseed oil. I got to put all these other additives so it can dry and all that. And I was like, oh shit, I was turned off by that real quick. So then I started getting into acrylic when I got into prison, right? I met a gentleman by the name of Johnny Child, one of the greatest painters I ever saw. And he was weird, right? And everybody said, you're just as weird as I am. You know what I mean? I didn't understand that artists have a different mindset of their own until I started, kind of getting into it. I was 20-something years old, and started getting into this painting arena. So I found myself in prison. Either I was in the law library playing basketball, sports, competitive sports, and I was very good at that, or I was in there painting. I met a gentleman by the name of Johnny Child, one of the most revolutionary folk black artists. And he was one of the meanest guys I've ever imagined, man. He was just so always just in his own, he would paint, but this guy would paint, and he was making hundreds of thousands of dollars selling paintings, and because he could paint you just like you, like right there, how you looked. He was one of those painters that, like he could take a photograph, and mimic that same photograph. I'm not that type of artist. However, if I took, a year to do one like that, I could get it that way, but that's not me. So when I met Johnny Childs, it kind of opened up my art, and I was like, I always thought he was weird and different and just mean as shit, and just always disgruntled, always pissed off and everything. But I just realized that he wasn't being mean and he wasn't doing that. He was basically me, and I was him. He was me in his younger days, and I was him in his older days. And I'm reflecting on all that. I said, man, he said, man, do you even know what an artist is? Do you know you need to do your homework on he called me chicken head. Chicken, you're a weird ass individual. I'm like, what do you mean? I said, you're weird as shit. You know what I'm saying? You calling me weird? I said, yeah. So at that point in time, me and him became cellmates. And he loved me like a son, and then we had like a relationship, like a father-son relationship. And I was like, man, you weird as shit. He said, man, I can't be no more weird than you. I said, but one thing about a chicken head is I done lived a lot of life and done did a lot of criminalistic shit. But one thing about it, you can't touch me when it comes down to painting. You can learn. I said, well, what the hell can I learn from an old man like you? You done lived your life. He said, I tell you what, you just keep on living, and if you blessed enough to get to where I'm at, you're going to understand it's going to come back. Mr. Childs died about 18 years ago, and everything that he said is so true. It wasn't the fact that he was disgruntled. It wasn't the fact that he was pissed off. It wasn't the thing that he came across, this, that. What I'm seeing is that you get a point in time in this life that your hopes in this of seeing peace, this thing where you have in your mind that is heaven, that you see everybody's equal, everybody can smile together, everybody can eat together. Because when you're painting, you have the power to paint and be whatever you want to be as an artist. And then when you don't see it being applied in this way, this world that you're seeing, this world, it really does something to you. So that it comes off like, you know what, this disgruntled, all this type of stuff is going on. But it's really not true. It's an artist has a different vision, you know, of seeing things throughout the lens from an artist, whether it's the good or whether it's bad. So all those stories, if you're grateful, if you're live long enough to digest it and translate all that you've done and put it into your storytelling, as I do, then that's all you can do. That's the most gratifying thing, is just see a people, wow, that's great, to bring a smile.
March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. Why is that so important to you?
Well, that's very important because that's the day I got out. 1998, March 17th, I got out. I was picked up by, at the time was one of my best friends, Johnny Day's girlfriend, and she picked me up at the airport and took me to the halfway house out in Wilmer, Texas, Wilmer Hutchinson, Texas. And shortly after that, my mom came up and was hugging, boo hoo hoo, and all that good stuff. And I'd had that size on me, that military weight. I mean, that prison weight that I had on it on myself at the time. So, how was that for me? Believe it or not, the day that I left, I wept because I, was happy, but I was also sad because some of my greatest friends was left back, and it was touching, it was emotional, not because uh, there was a lot of things that I learned in prison. There was a lot of truth that I learned in prison. There was a lot of great things that I learned in prison. I would never take that back, because that's the person who I became. And also, I realized that when you are uh, in prison, you realize that 65% of the people are there because they're telling the truth or they're trying to survive. 35% of the people are people that really should be in there. And the reason why I said be in there is because those are murderers, rapists, and things of that nature. Those people should truly be in there. But people that are trying to survive and trying to make ends meet for their family and things that, if you haven't robbed and ruined somebody's lives and stuff like that and raped and all that, yeah, those people need to be in there. But people that really just were bystanders on certain things and just trying to do things just to survive, to feed their cancerous kid, or to get a head start. I think that the judicial system should really look at that. And the day that I got out, I weep because there were so many things and so many great people that I was leaving behind, and at the same time that I'll never be able to see. And once I got home, it was like, in some instance, in some time, it was like, man, prison was a lot easier than this, because now you had to get out of prison, and the transition you had that X on your back, and no one hires a person that has their X on their back. Even if you have been exonerated, you still have that X on your back because people just always hear this thing in their head, right? So like today, I can't get no job. I mean, who's gonna hire me at $15 an hour? That's what gave me the strength and the energy to keep moving and going forward, and seeing the big picture and the big light on this thing called purpose. When you're chosen, and I know, I use this word chosen, and people who have this it thing know that they're chosen, whether it's producers, whether it's people like yourself, Sharina, whether it's great-minded people like yourself that be able to take down some excerpts out of somebody's brain and translate it into your artistic form and do the great work that you do. I was just like, wow, I just met this young lady 3 weeks ago and she's already inside my head. How does that happen? Because she's been chosen, and only chosen people understand chosen people. Only great people know great people. And this is this thing that what we call this world of creation, because we are the ones who create the world for a better place. We are the ones who create laws to be written, to be able to take things and accountability so the laws can be changed. Hey, you can't do this. Martin Luther King, Mike Tyson, all these great people that have been in prison, Muhammad Ali, Jesus, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, all these people were in prison. All these people are artistic. All these people left a stain. Just like yourself. I mean, you are leaving a stain because your artistic intelligence supersedes what the norm is. If you did a statistic and seen what an artist is not just a person that comes every day. An artist is a person that's like one in a million, the way that he's think, the way, for me anyways, that's how I think, So it's so elated to do work or allow you to do this work, because I too see some artistic forms inside yourself. This is what allows me to know once I got out of prison. This is still my prison release, you know what I mean? I'm still out on prison release. Like I can just go back to March 17th, 1998, and to understand it right now in present day, to meet people like yourself that are doing things at some point when you sit back and say, why do I like storytelling so much? Because that's who you are. You've been chosen to be who you are.
So what was your first job out of prison?
Working for a company called Lone Star Inflatables. Lone Star Inflatables was a company that manufactured and made, and they leased, rented out inflatables like the bounce houses, castles, and they was also opening up a commercial part of Lone Star Inflatables where they're able to sell advertisement banners, inflatable gorillas, inflatable bounce houses where they'd go out, and if a new company would be opening up, new store and stuff like that, they'd bring out their inflatable banners saying, hey, we're open for business and si habla español or whatever. And that was the job that I was doing. And my job was basically to be brutally killing me, to clean up all the bounce houses that came. You saw anything from vomit to, it was just kids, bouncing cakes and spillage on the bounce houses and all inflatable. So I was the one in the back of the warehouse doing what no one else wanted to do. So again, me having to take a job and me just kind of getting acclimated back into society, I would have to take this type of odd job, and it was paying me like $8.50 an hour. So then that translated into a situation where they was opening up a segment, and there was this a young lady that was working there, but she was also the girlfriend to the boss. So she got all the big contracts when we went into the commercial part. However, she wasn't closing the deals like I was closing the deals, and the money was substantially different. So there was another opportunity that came in where we broke away. One of the guys that used to work there, he broke away and started up his own company and approached me and said, hey, I'm going to open up a commercial side of the inflatables. Would you like to to a 10, and you can take 50% of everything that you bring in. I'll set it up. You meaning that they'll set it up, and I'll take half the money. I was like, absolutely. So then when the money started rolling in, they started realizing that he wanted to get an investor, but the investor said, well, you're giving up way too much money. Why don't you just start giving them 10%? Meaning me. I said, I'm not going to take 10%. So once that started off, that led me from leaving the Lone Star Inflatable, going to the commercial, going into finding my own way of basically getting into the club and an entertainment business.
At what point did you part ways?
I parted ways because I was being short on monies and some overtime and some other things that I did that I was supposed to get some money. And then the investor addressed me and told me he wasn't going to give me this, that, but I'll write you a check right now and give you this portion. I said, no, I don't want that portion. I need my full, what I worked for. So at that point in time, I never got that last check, and tried to file unemployment. They made this false narrative about all kinds of stuff, and the guy that I've known for many years that got me on the job in cahoots went in with the false narrative, and from that point on I exited out, and that's when I left the company.
What did you do after you left the company?
I picked up a company from a friend of mine that I knew right before I went to prison. His name was Johnny Day, and he opened up a orthomedic company as a salesperson. I also worked with this company called Interstate Business Management, which was a tax company where I just basically went and took the tax forms to different companies, signed them up for tax services. Basically, they would give me all their receipts and profit and loss statements, put it in this package, and then I'd take it back to the office. They would break it down and actually let them know what they owe for this month, each quarter, or whatever, and they pay for that service. So I was basically driving all over Dallas, picking up packages, selling the company, opening up new clients and stuff like that. Basically like a paper route, but with doing taxes. And then also I was doing the orthomedic where I was teaching, where I went to a program where it taught, nurses, surgeons, and people to how to use orthotics, with people, on Medicare, Medicaid. I'd go in there and basically qualify them, see if they were qualified for orthotics, wheelchairs, motorized wheelchairs, scooters. Had a lot to do with the Medicare, Medicaid sectors. So that's what I did before I went and got into the club business.
How did you get into the club business?
I basically loved everything about entertainment because when I was, when I told you when I was before I got to prison, I was in the entertainment business, in the record industry, in terms of the business part. We're managing Jay Chill, and I just felt that that's where I was supposed to be. And then I got with a gentleman that I was marketing by the name of Rodney G. Rodney G was a manager to like DOC, Snoop Dogg, so many artists out there. So once him and I got together, he wanted me to do the same thing. It was basically, I was his intern, and intern was basically a flunky where he was just using the shit out of me. You know what I mean? I'm sorry, Rodney, but I'm telling the truth. Basically just we was going on to promotional tours and stuff like that, setting up this and setting up that. We're not even getting paid, but having the hopes of getting paid, this gaslighting where, you're going to do this, you're going to take you with you, we're going to do all these things. That's what people do, you know what I mean? They don't have no intentions on allowing other people to shine, but basically they needed manpower, and that's what that was. So I was basically just horned in thinking that this was my opportunity. And it really was, because it taught me to get the hell away from people like that and just be my own person and just believe in the universe and believe in God, what God has laid out for me through this tribulations, this trials, this all the pain that I'm going through, to wake up every day and say, if you don't have a dollar, still get up. There's, I'm going to provide for you. So everything that I've done since that part allowed me to land a job at Club Blue. And then when I got to Club Blue, I was very, very good. I negotiated a deal with the owner of Club Blue, and we did a 50-50 split at the door, meaning anybody that comes in, I'd get 50%. And then they would take the bar, and I'd take 50% of the door. So for the first week I got there, and the numbers were anywhere from $10 to $20, and then the skip line would be $50 to $100, depends on what to get. And I didn't get any of that skip line money, because that skip line money would turn into $10,000. And I remember my first cut that I was supposed to get 50%. I think the door did like $20-something thousand, and I got like $3,000. I said, this is not a 50% cut, right? But I needed the money, because it was more money than most people were getting in a week anytime. I was getting it in one day. So that strung along. I'd have to go to meetings. I'd have to come up with creative marketing savvy to be able to bring people in the door each and every week, you know? So I would just take flyers to each and every building, car, any events, and I would just put them on different cars and stuff like that. And then things just started getting bigger. So at Club Blue, the owner was just really ruthless, and he would always renege on the deal. So that deal went from that 50-50 part, which I wasn't getting 50-50, till $1 a head. You know what I mean? So if 1,000 people came in, you got $1,000. It was basically lowering my pay. So I accepted that. So then after that came through, that allowed me to meet up with my future partner that we built this empire called AP Ronald Productions. And that's when we started buying clubs, promoting other clubs, and things of that nature. So my partner was basically a big investor in Club Blue. And as I was in the realm of having meetings with the owners of Club Blue, they was telling me about all the things that the guys that invest were never going to get their money. And I couldn't sit down. It didn't digest well with me, because that's just not the person who I am. So one thing led to another. I met, two of the investors. One of them said, well, let's go into business to guard. Let's do our own thing. So I was able to accept it, and then we was able to do exactly what we did. But he was not really seasoned in the Hispanic market, because he did not know the culture, but there was a big, huge base in the Hispanic market that was not really serviced the way that it needed to be serviced. That's when I came in, and that's when all my marketing savvy and promotion savvy and the imagination kicked in, and we started promoting the club in the North Dallas area, and the club just blew up. And from that point on, we got to a point that we got enough money to invest in our own club. And once we were able to invest in our own club, that led into buying restaurants and other clubs and other small venues and things of that nature. Simultaneously, when we weren't doing that, we was also promoting other clubs. And while we were promoting other clubs, we was able to get 50% or even 100% of all the door. So in 7 days, we was making $5,000 here at this club, $25,000 at this club, $30,000, and then coming back and making another $25,000 a night on our club. So the monies was just coming in like left from right. We was able to invest in promotions, marketing, bringing in all the biggest name acts that you ever want to meet, from Pitbull to Daddy Yankee to all these major clubs. Acts that we was able to be intricate on bringing in, big name acts that you identify with right now. Also, one of my partners was able to bring in Lady Gaga. I remember paying Lady Gaga $7,000, Pitbull $2,500, Nicky Jam, which is an international star, paying him $3,000, and because these acts were up and coming. Bruno Mars, $8,000, when people didn't know him. And I was like, well, if you book this act now and give them the $8,000, because you remember they're starting off as struggling artists, right? Once those struggling artists you get them at a certain point, the key is just don't book them for a week. Just say, you know what, here's $8,000. Let's go ahead and book you 3 or 4 months down the line when you get really, really hot, right? Sometimes they just fade out, but if they get really, really hot, that money that you spent $8,000 can turn out to $150,000 just in 4 months. So I was able to predict or gauge where these promoters were charting in terms of, there's this thing called Billboard. They used to have Billboard 100. You'll see a act or a artist starting off at 100, and then if he was declining, the arrow was declining. Like when it was declining, meaning it was going down in numbers. Like this week they're number 10, next week they're number 5, and so on. So the charting was charting in our favor, and some of them was fading out. But the ones that charted in our favor, you hit a grand slam or home run. So then all these radio stations was taking, like paying attention, like, man, these AP Rhino are the people, So everywhere we went, we had a remote station on hand with the radio station. Would give the radio station about $30,000, $40,000 a week. We would spend $1 million a year just to promote and market, just on radio. Not to also talk about the thousands and millions that we'd have to pay to book these acts and then do these festivals and wrap these cars and get the T-shirts, get the hats. Everything had to tie in merchandise, and that came right out of my head. Just, hey, we need to get this, we need to get that, we need to do this together. So we built an empire for 12 years, 13 years. No one in the city could touch us. I mean, nobody. You could, we even have history on marketing companies that took our strategy and still using it to this day, and they can't mimic it because I know the formula. And so once that business got to a point that it got so big, you saw people in the background, that people that I taught the formula to, that are huge in the industry now, and they've also sabotaged me from getting back into that because they knew if I got back into it, it'd be over. And so at that point, in the beginning, when all that happened, when everything started going down, that was my my motivations to get back and do it. But everybody ganged up on me. And I didn't realize it till later on, to the point where I said, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to fight this. Let me get into something that I can build the same way, the same formula, but know I can do it with Arts by Tadeo.
Now where you're at with Arts by Tadeo and building this place, did you build your gallery the same way, the same intention, how growing up with Miss Lloyd was? Because Mrs. Lloyd was a safe space for you, and I've been here for a couple of weeks now, and I've seen so many different people come in here, whether they're having a safe space or that I've even seen them conduct business and have different things in here, and I realized, like, reading your story and seeing how Mrs. Lloyd made such a big influence on you, it feels like this was created with the same intention.
Miss Lloyd, I think creation with the intentions are basically not so much what Miss Lloyd did, was just basically what God in the universe put you in place to put a person that was such a giving, touchable. You remember when I said that people come in your lives and they awaken you, and you can go back and use those references on how you was awakened? What I use Miss Lloyd's giving and caring and loving nature and just being the God-sent person, the angel person that was sent to me at that time, or sent to my family at that time, to basically rescue a part of what my mother needed. But at the same time, as Moses was going down the river and he was rescued, or Joseph was in a hole and he was rescued, and Job went through all these processes and he was rescued, it's because all the strength and the purpose of the omnipotent, the universe, God, put people in places for your purpose to be purposeful. And you also go through this traumatic thing and this traumatic life. So back to Miss Lloyd. I believe this Miss Lloyd was just basically a Mother Moses. And, where they got this Moses law, you know what I mean? I think she was just in place. I was 3 years old, 4 years old. So, yeah, there you see all these parallels to what happens to kids or what happened to great people. I'm not saying that I'm a great person, but what I'm saying is I am him, and I feel that I'm him, because if I don't believe in myself, and if I don't humble myself and think greatness for myself, then I can't be the person that I was sent here to be. I believe in myself. I believe in my purpose. So that Mother Moses is just like, you see many, many stories about great people that create great things, that are able to do certain things to leave a stain for humanity, for the betterment of humanity, basically, has allowed me to just be the person 40 years later on. And all of a sudden, God has been molding you, and, universe been molding you to be this type of person. I have not been an angel, but by no means. And I struggle each and every day, on all the sinful things that I've done and all the mismanagement things that I've done to people that wasn't deserving. But at the same time, I believe that there was a higher purpose for me to be that type of person, to be able to be stripped down to the bare bone and fall on my knees and say, God, I can't do this anymore. The universe, I can't do this anymore. And the universe said, you know what? Are you going to finally start to create your purpose, or be your purpose that you're here, that we sent you here to be? So yeah, have I been stripped down to the bare bone, been broken up, been brokenhearted, been destroyed, been ravished, been stepped on? But I'm still here because I had to go through all those traumatic processes. And it started from the love of Miss Lloyd and leaving her household. And then that's when all the pain started being inflicted. Pain, I can honestly tell you there's ain't been but 5 years of my life that I've been happy, though my whole life has been depressed.
With this place, how you build and put your art here, what was your intention? Why did you do it? Because you could have sold this in so many other different places. So what made you get this specific studio gallery?
Again, a friend of mine's, Corey, I was just leaving this deal where I was going to go and do a big deal with Little M. And Little M was supposed to allow me to do the FIFA World Cup. And this was probably about 9 months ago. And we sat down in front of a panel with the recreational department that covers all the artists and all the things that attracts the entertainment to the city of Little M. The chief of police was there, and I think there was about 6 other people on the panel where I was basically giving them my vision on how the FIFA World Cup would bring in a lot of business to that city during the month of FIFA, and also put Little M somewhat on the map. And everybody been into it. And then as I was leaving that meeting, I was on 35, and I had picked up Corey, and Corey said, man, you know what? You need to meet this gentleman. Miss, I said, I don't want to meet no damn body, because at that point in time, I'm just meeting people that just talk, and they don't see the vision, right? So for whatever reason, we spent around, and we came back, and I met this gentleman by the name of Jimmy, a very highly intelligent gentleman. I resonated with him because I seen him in me. When I was in the club business, he was just, his ADHD kicked in, and it just was moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and that was me. So we started talking. He said, man, if you can set this thing up, go back and set up this big tent, we could probably do something. So one thing led to another. I'd met with him, and he saw some of my art. He's like, wow, man, why don't you put the art in my space? I have my space. And I was like, well, first of all, you want to bring concerts, you want to do all these things. I don't have no money. I'm strapped. So before I get into anything, I'm letting you know where I'm at, where a lot of people don't do that. They just, gaslight and tell people what they want to hear, pretend. I said, no, I'm not pretending. I'm in this space right now where I sequestered myself for 5 years since COVID, and saw this vision. And a lot of times I'm like, why am I painting? Why am I painting? Why am I doing all these things? Because remember, I'm being pushed and been gravitating, going towards where the universe wants me to go. You know, one painting, the other painting. I'm just find myself like hypnotized, just pumping these paintings out, these stories. And now that part to what you asked in terms of what made you get this art by Tadeo, this gallery, because if I have 50 pieces and I don't have nowhere to put them at, and then all of a sudden, well, I got 50 pieces here, I need to put them somewhere, and that person said, well, you can put all that stuff in here. And then that stuff comes, right? And then that solidifies a piece of my journey that's a checked off, boom, that tells the story about myself, that everything that is purposeful, the universe, God is going to put it in play for you. But he's going to take you through some painful directions before you get there. So to answer your question, that part of the gallery was the part where it opened up. And then I started saying, okay, well then let me start putting everything up. Again, that costs money. Plexiglass costs money. Paint costs money. And each and every time, it's like I need a painting, and for some odd reason, hey, my sister will call me, hey, you know what, I got $300 for you. And I'm like, for what? Because you're my brother and I know you need it, boom, boom, or something like that. Or a friend might say, you know what, let me get one of those paintings right there, $6,000. Okay, well, here's the painting, That allows you to strand out and stretch things out to get to the next level. So you hear this thing about, man, struggling, starving artists, right? And all that type of stuff. Yeah, it's true. And then, you got a lot of stuff that's going to be worth a lot, but, you got to die first. I said, well, is that what it is? Well, at least let me get a fraction of what it's going to be worth, and I'll be okay in this future or this present situation. So also, I think a lot of artists, I'm different and they're different. Some of them are way greater than myself, you know what I mean? And right now, because, there's a small niche in art and everybody, this is just that Basquiat too. No one picked up on Basquiat till recently, right? All of a sudden, this gentleman bought a painting from Basquiat at $348 million. $348 million for one Basquiat. Now, do you know who the number one artist is? Sought out artist? It's not no Rembrandt, and it's not none of that. It's Basquiat. And Basquiat had a story. And what did he do? He just painted and because he hung out with Andy Warhol, right? Andy Warhol was a real big time painter at that time, right? Was his love interest, from what I understand. One thing led to another, but now he's bigger than you hear. When you hear Basquiat, you're like, wow, he's bigger than Andy Warhol. So you don't know what your purpose is, what your stain is going to be. Just know that you live it, and from what I'm, I know without a shadow of a doubt that the world is nothing but art. I'm not doing art to basically say, well, I'm gonna be a football player or a basketball player, or I'm doing this for a living or anything like that, because I damn sure ain't making a living being a starving artist. There has to be some type of motivation that is driving me to pick up a brush when 8, 10, 15 hours, and there's no income coming in, right? And you're still surviving, and you're still creating. So if you put all those things together, it tells you that there is a drive, there is something there, there's a purpose there, like Tesla, creating a certain part of electricity, you know what I mean? The AC or the DC. I know one of them created AC. I think it was the DC. That's Tesla, I believe. Don't PowerPoint me for that. AC being Thomas Edison and DC being Tesla, There's a driving point that has allowed me to highlight and put this thing of smile on humans' faces, to show them that, hey, through art, there's another side. So I have came up with a gallery, Arts by Tadeo, and we're going to be doing a show to highlight those different accolades about what artists go through from the mindset of an artist. It's not like when you go to certain galleries, the artist ain't even there. You just go to a gallery and you look at the paintings. Like if you go to a mall and the paintings are there, the artist ain't there. Well, I'm here in living form that I'm taking monies that I don't even have to put on a show to highlight it to the people. Food, drinks, everything that cost, but it's free. For the people. Yeah, would it be nice to sell a art piece? Yeah, because if I sell an art piece, that means the message and the smile and the happiness can be extended now even larger. So that means I can make things happen even larger where more people come in and the love and the happiness could be spreaded. We have enough of this thing called hate in the world. I don't want to create hate. I don't want to create bombs. I want to create something that people can enjoy and have a good time. And in this art world, if people just in general would create something that gives them some kind of uplifting happiness, I think this world would be a better place. I've already lived enough traumatic experience and all the things that I've been through to know what the bad things, or to see the bad things in the world. And I don't want to live like that. No one wants to live like that. So if somebody can see these colorful pieces, with the balloons and the airplanes and the dogs running and some of my paintings, or some people actually dancing in my painting, or some horses or some butterflies, and people can actually see that and say like, wow, this is some really good stuff. And then they internalize it into their own life and resonate with inside them, their own self, and say, you know what, I can really resonate with that. I could really identify with that. Then for me, that's the glorious thing that I can take with me. It's like, wow, you know what I mean?
What do you want people to take away from your story?
I think people would leave with a whole another perception or perspective, especially the people that know me or knew me. They would have a whole different, profound way of thinking about me, because these are the things that I've really never disclosed to anybody until this point. So when they leave out, they'll have a different perception, and the ones who just met me would have a profound perception and a great perception about a person that really cares for the souls and the mindset and the heart for every human that lives on this earth. And that's what I want them to leave with.